Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Morley.
And today we are sitting with the beautiful and the amazing MSU certified mystical coach, Madison Creel, everybody. Yes, Madison, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you guys.
Yes, Madison was in my class, and if there's anyone that has transformed in the last 6 months, Madison is definitely one of those people. Your story is incredible, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of folks out there. Religion, relationships, and self. Let's get into it. Madison, where were you before you found MSU, and what really drew you into this organization?
So, growing up, I was in a Southern Baptist church. So it's really dogmatic religion. And something inside of me didn't really settle with what I was listening. Like I knew there was something more, but the way that it was delivered, it just felt a little bit off. And growing up, I kind of was trying to find an outlet, trying to find something that just meant a little bit more to me. And it wasn't until around like after I graduated from college, I got introduced to kind of being able to find the truth within yourself. And just with how it was delivered as a child, religion and God felt like very judgmental to me, where it was like I was really scared about what I was doing and if I was doing the right thing. And I just felt a lot of shame and guilt around just the way that I was living my life. And so once I was introduced to, I think it was when I was in Thailand, just seeing all these beautiful people and realizing that they, according to what I had learned growing up, they were all going to hell. And that really kind of struck a chord in me, and it didn't really even make sense even more to me. And once I started really honing in on what it feels like to be when something is true to me, just when your cells and all in your body are just like vibrating and with truth, that is when I knew that I kind of needed to branch off a little bit and find something that resonated more with who I am and the truth of everything, right? So that kind of was my introduction to doing more inner work and listening to that voice within you, because we all have it. And yeah, that's kind of how I started more digging into the truth within myself.
Religion, the shame, the everybody else is going to hell and like there's nothing I can do about it. And it almost creates like this weird hierarchy too of like superiority and like inferiority. It's like it's everything that God is not, you know?
Right.
And that's what we're raised in, and that's what we're literally like. I really see it as some kind of brainwashing, you know. There's so much judgment, there's so much guilt, and so much shame. So you know, you were always different. I've always told you this, that you were placed in that scenario of your life. Your soul chose that because you were meant to be the one that like kind of changed the game. And so what's the experience been like? Because as soon as you probably stepped into that, so many programs probably started running for you, right?
Right. I feel like it's almost like you're in a box, especially with religion. And there's a lot of good that I experienced. There's a lot, like, let's say in the Bible, you hear about oneness and love and unconditional love, and all of those aspects really resonated with me. But then you have the aspect of a judgmental God, a jealous God. And then there's also parts in the Bible that we have grown out of, like homophobia and, women serving the man. And so it's just, what parts do you believe and what parts do you not believe? And are you just falling into what society has deemed acceptable? So we're just kind of all flowing at this like slow rate where we're slowly starting to get it. Are we basically deriving our truth from what somebody else is telling us? And as I started growing out of that, I did feel a lot of kind of shame. It's like you're in like a box, like a shame box. It's like when you start to think even something slightly different than what you were taught as in these dogmatic religions, it's like so it's like uncomfortable because you have that shame placed on you. So even trying to think a little bit, you're like, oh, you want to suck back into the box because you are afraid, because it's dictated by fear. There's so much fear in it, as far as like, if you think something else or live your life in a different way, you're going to be, first of all, very judged. You're going to be pitied. And I just remember growing up just feeling bad for my friends that weren't Christian, because I knew they were going to hell, and all these things. And so it's like growing out, trying to like surpass that, and especially like speaking about it is even harder, because there's so many people that you are instantly judged by because you are living from a truth that might be a little bit different. Like I don't want to say my God. Like, I don't like to use the word God, because the way I was brought up, the term God meant separate from. And I've come to find out God is in everything, and in the trees and the birds and the sky and in every cell of your body. It's a connection. And so that, I think, is the biggest hurdle. But once I was able to get over that hurdle and have more of like a oneness, like a connection versus a separate relationship with God or universe or source. Those are the terms that I feel like is used a little more often when we're doing this work, just because when I say God, I don't want somebody to automatically think like, oh, this is the type of God, growing up in dogmatic religion. This is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're talking about God, and my understanding of God, source, the universe, unconditional love. And how can you feel judgment and scared and shame and guilt when something's coming from unconditional love? So I went through the same thing when I was a child. I went into studying religion and like getting really interested by it because there was something deep within that was driving me towards it. But then I couldn't understand, like, if God existed, why I was seeing so much pain and suffering in the world, and why there was so much judgment and fear and it was what I realized, it was they like missed the mark on a few things in terms of religion. Like it's not fully grasped what the universe or God fully is, because God is unconditional love. It's everything. It's all of it, and it has no fear. It has no judgment. It just is. And you mentioned something in at the beginning. You're speaking about hell. I would love you to go into what you thought hell was then versus how you feel about the term hell now. Because I was just recently with someone who I care about a lot, and I introduced the idea that someone asked me, she was like, what do you believe in heaven? I was like, of course I believe in heaven. We're in heaven. The kingdom of heaven is within it. We can either be living in, this is my perception, you can either be living in hell, or you can be living in heaven. And that's all to do with your perception of yourself and how you're viewing the world. So what's your view on hell, and how has that evolved and changed over the years, and especially through this work with MSU?
It's interesting too that you mention that heaven is within, because there are just so many of these lines in the Bible that make so much sense. And it's like, oh my gosh, this feels right within me. Yes, heaven is within, though they're almost overlooked and passed on, or there's certain phrases or verses that are interpreted to be a little bit more separating us from them. So as far as hell, that's a tough one. When I think about hell growing up, that's where the fear came from. Not only God that was judging you and dictating with his unconditional love, who he deems appropriate to go to hell and who he feels like should go to heaven. Hell is where you are burning alive, and there's demons and all these beautiful illustrations made very clear in the Bible. So it's almost like that's where that control and that fear and that and it's never like when you want somebody else to be Christian, it's not like, it's more out of I feel bad for this person because they're going to go to hell. And so that is definitely the way that I perceived hell growing up. And now, like you said, it's a state of mind. It is, you see so many people in this world suffering mentally, where it's like let's say, you have everything, you have the house, you have the car, you have the girl, but inside you're hating your life, you're depressed. That is hell. And it's all a mentality, like obviously there's pain in the world, but from that pain you can either learn to see it and work through it and heal it, or you can use it as a way to continue suffering through your life. And in that sense, hell can be the worst place in the world, but that's all within you, and you have that option, and you have the option to perceive and view life as a heaven, And I have explained this in an example with one of my friends. Is that like anything could be heaven, right? I don't know if you guys have had COVID, but you lose your taste for 4 or 5 to a week. And once you're able to taste food, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I forgot how great food can actually be. And we have access to that. We don't, just because we had COVID and we were away from that, like food could be heaven. Like anything, as long as you are able to see almost like the divinity and the depth in every interaction with somebody, and just sitting with yourself and seeing the trees and seeing nature, or connecting with your loved ones, reading, I don't know, literally anything, walking. So it's all very much where you're at inside, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that so much of what we're taught to is like, we're constantly asking for forgiveness for being a sinner, like I used to have anxiety every time I would do something that I thought was against what's something that Jesus would hate. And so it was this constant battle of like, I'm a sinner, I'm unworthy, I'm low, like, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. And then that's what we think love is and God is. And I remember during my awakening, this topic of heaven and hell would come up, and someone said to me, earth is hell, look around you. And it's like so much suffering, violence, rape, sex trafficking, like we've created this because of the darkness that emanates out of us. And I think that's why earth was like, it's time. It's time that we get back to the original state, which is love and oneness. And I think that's why this journey is so deep. People who don't understand this journey, when they ask you like, what's it like, what do you mean, it's like, you can't even explain it. You have to go through this on your own to really understand and grasp the fullness of this experience, because awakening is like none other. And so, Madison, I remember you from day one. If there's anything I can say about you, you're a girl, you're curious. You always ask questions, which I love about you. You've always got a billion questions because you're challenging everything that you've ever known. And so what brought you to MSU? Because I think people who come from like church and religion and then Rachel Fiori, it's like two completely different dimensions and realities and worlds. And so what was it about Rachel, or like what brought you here that really drew you in?
So kind of going back to what I was mentioning earlier, it's that inner understanding of that, like hearing something and just knowing, just feeling like, wow, this makes so much sense, and being drawn towards that. And it wasn't until I was doing, I've always had these concepts. I've been really into reading the books, spiritual personal growth, listening to all the podcasts. Just basically, I've been a sponge for the last 2 or 3 years of my life. And, there's some things when things started overlapping, because when you're kind of transitioning out of kind of like strict dogmatic belief systems, you need that reassurance almost. You're like, you hear something, you're like, oh, that sounds right. But it's like, oh, like there's still something that's like, I need reassurance. I need science. I need some proof. So through the books and podcasts, it's like, there was so much overlapping information that sounded so right. And I'm like, did this author talk to this author about this concept? Because they're like talking about the same thing, and they both sound right. It sounds very true. And same with podcasts, like they all must be collaborating. Like maybe they're all thinking that you have to learn information from somebody else. Like somebody else has to teach you in order for you to be able to come to a conclusion. And through that process, and once I started with Rachel, I just kind of honing in on my own understanding of the world and what really feels right to me, and knowing that we can have that wisdom and access that wisdom within ourselves. And that's when it hit me, like all of these people, they're saying that they're drawing this information from this, they're channeling it, or they feel it within themselves, or they have sourced it. And that's like, okay, this is the same source that I have. And I can access that, through there, there's things that are blocking me from it, all those wounds and energies and triggers, and kind of making things about the humanness and the behaviors. And so it's like working through those pieces of us in order to gain access.
So you mentioned there about wounds and blocks, and this is a great place to start going into the work we do at MSU, because it is all about that. It's all about finding what is blocking me from achieving greatness. What is blocking me from spiritually evolving, from becoming a better human, from being more connected to my heart, from being more in love with myself, with my partner, with life, with everything. That's what we do here at MSU, is we're really trying to just get back to love, get back to peace and joy. And we can only do that by honoring our pain and honoring the darkness that lives within us. We don't avoid anything. We go into that stuff. And so I'd love for you to start talking about what are some big blocks that you had, some big wounds, some big programs that you've managed to see through this work and heal and start to process and work on.
So unlike basically everybody in my class, I don't really identify as an HSP or highly sensitive person. So I feel like that has made this program a little bit harder for me, in a sense of, I see these individuals in my class that are so connected to their emotions and what they're feeling, and whether it's, anxiety or sadness or frustration, or like just all these emotions are heightened within them. When I started, I was very disconnected from my emotions, and that is one of the strategies that I learned growing up, compartmentalizing. When I was going through difficult times, is just putting those emotions in that box for later, or never, until they come up. So one of the biggest hurdles was actually diving into what I'm actually feeling, because basically my whole life, whenever I'd feel a little bit of something, I just push it away. And so gaining that acuity and of the awareness of what is going on in my body, it took me a couple months, and I saw these people in my class just going through these breakthroughs and diving into these wounds of theirs, and I'm like, why don't I don't have any wounds? Like what like I feel fine. And so it wasn't until I really just started spending a lot more time in my heart space and inviting. It's almost like you're talking to your soul. Your inner child my inner child was very not very comfortable with me. So this inner child, in a sense of this little child that had experienced all this woundedness and had to build up all these walls in order to function through life. And she didn't trust me because I kept pushing her away when she'd try to show up and show me the pain that she had been experiencing. So the first couple months, the first month I didn't really know I needed to spend more time in my heart space. I'm like, I just want these emotions to hit me hard. I want to change. I want to heal some of this stuff. And then the second month I was spending more time in my heart space, just creating an environment like safety, almost like talking to my soul or my inner child. Hey, it's okay to show up. It's okay. Show me what you want to show me. And then holding on to the tiny things that happen throughout the day. Because I noticed when I slowed down that there are some instances throughout the day where like my stomach would drop a little bit, or I get kind of like a small little like irk. And that's all that I really knew how to feel before I pushed it away. And it was so automatic, just pushing it away. So grabbing onto those little irks and just sitting with it and growing it. Okay, what's kind of coming out of my heart space? What is this trying to show me? And that's when I started really feeling into things, and my inner child felt a lot more safe to express herself because she knew that I would be able to be a container for the emotions that she has to show me. But not until I was able to really open up and create that safety was she able to really show me the wounds that I have. And my awesome strategy of compartmentalizing was really great for a long time because it helped me function through day-to-day life.
It kept you
Kept
safe.
me safe. Yeah, but I don't need that anymore because it's blocking me from really accessing the truth and just my soul. And so it's kind of how it all started.
It's beautiful. And I know it's something that we've worked on together as coaches, because I've really struggled with disconnection. And I know like that's a lot of like what you've been working through. And what you touched on there is just how we can really think we're happy in life, but actually we're living in unconsciousness. And until we really start refining our acute level of self-awareness, which is what you were speaking on, and where you were like, oh, just little moments in the day where I'd have a slight odd feeling that until we start really going into those and start opening and expanding those and finding where they come from, then we can starting to get into this process, which is what you speak of. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm just going to drop in and heal everything in a minute. It's like, oh no, I've got to really start becoming conscious of how unconscious I'm being, and developing that safety within myself, so your inner child can trust you, so that you can connect to him or her, and so that you can eventually be free. It's so awesome, and it's awesome to see that you've really grown. So you've worked through a lot of the compartmentalization, the disconnection. Have you come across any really deep wound? Because that's obviously some big programs that you've seen show up in the way that you behave and the feelings and everything. Have you managed to get into something that was really painful that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yes. So just touching on that point of kind of feeling so like in love, basically, and seeing so deeply. It's almost like when you start diving into your pain, it's like a veil is lifted off of your face, and you can experience life at a whole new level. So you don't really know what that is when you think that you're happy until you actually dive in and you're like, wow, this is actually accessible. I'd say for the majority, a lot of the big changes I've noticed have been in myself and through my relationships. For the first couple years of my relationship, maybe the first year and a half, I wanted so badly for my partner to see me, to connect with me on the deep level that I needed. And it was like fighting tooth and nail. I'm just like reaching out to him, like, see me, and I can see these behavior patterns in him, and all my attention was on him. And oh, like, he's reacting this way. Oh, I just want him to do this so he can connect with me in this way and be that person that I want him to be, in a sense of I really want somebody to connect deeply with. And it wasn't until like halfway through the program that I was sharing this wound, because there was a day that I was overwhelmed with a little bit of sadness. Well, it started with a tiny bit of sadness, and then I started going into it, and then I was like, okay, this is huge. I wanted to be seen so bad, and I knew that I was not getting it from my partner. And I brought that up in class, and Rachel was like, you need to be able to see yourself. You need to be able to be that for yourself. And like, I knew that. And I almost like didn't want her to say that. I wanted her to say, just keep pushing your partner. He'll get there. And then I was like, I finally just stopped trying so hard to push that in my relationship. And I started focusing all my attention and my effort into seeing me, because I worked back down to a wound that I had when I was a child of just wanting to be validated, wanting to be seen. And I know this is a pretty big wound for a lot of people too. It's nothing, it doesn't even have to be super traumatic childhood. It could just be your parents don't have enough time for you, or your caregivers, was busy one time, or, a few times where they just were in the middle of something. They're like, oh, like, go play. It could be anything where it hits you and you just feel like, do I even matter? And this message came up with me a couple times where I've been pouring my heart and my energy into helping other people. Like, I love to help other people. And this has always been a drive for me my whole life. And my soul was just screaming out to me, what about me? That was one of the main biggest messages that hit me pretty hard. What about me? So why are you putting all your effort into helping these people when you haven't even validated your own emotions, when you have pushed yourself to the side, putting other people's emotions and other people's state as way more important? And I think that for a while, it's because I knew that I had this superpower of compartmentalizing. It's like, okay, I can compartmentalize. I can shift my emotions to the side so I can be there for this other person who can't do that. And so that's when I started really learning that I don't validate my own emotions, and I've put up more blockages to avoid feeling them so I can be there for other people. Though, how am I able to help these people if I'm not even able to help myself? So diving in and really healing. And that's kind of one of the biggest wounds for sure.
Yeah. I think that people think that, I think it's generational, right? Generational trauma. And as women, we are never taught self-love. Like, we're never taught to put ourselves first. It's everybody first and then you last, right?
Absolutely.
And then we think that's love, of like, we're so sacrificial. We always put others before ourselves, when in reality, love is actually putting yourself first. And people always ask, like, don't you think that's selfish though? And it's like, well, you're showing up 0% to everything else and giving everything of you to them. And then who's neglected? You. That doesn't make sense. And it's only when you realize, oh, I have to give that to me is when the tides turn and when it all changes. And I think that's why radical self-love it's so insane, because it's literally relearning everything you've ever been conditioned to believe. And so I think the moment that you start to really give that to yourself, because I remember you called me to one night and you were like freaking out about, a relationship in your life and wanting this person to like step up to the plate as much as you have stepped up to the plate for yourself. And it was just this reminder of that they're on their journey and it's you time. And I think that's something that we have to constantly remind ourselves of. It's our time. Because the way that we can light up the world is by lighting up ourselves first. And there's no selfish, that in fact is selflessness, because you're saying, hey, let me make sure I'm good. And let me make sure that I love me before I love you and you and you and you. And that's the work, right? And what is keeping ourselves from accessing all the love within? And I think that's the journey that you and I and Danny, we've all been on, is who am I and how do I love me?
Right. And you don't realize how you're showing up in relationship until you do start to love yourself, because I thought that I was showing up as love, giving and sacrificing myself for other people. And when something clicked for me, is like, we're all one, we are all equal. So why am I not showing myself as much love as I am showing other people? So yeah, that was a huge one. And just seeing how it has played a huge role in my relationship and seeing the wounds. It wasn't until I really focused and started pouring my energy into myself, seeing how my wounds have been showing up in my relationships, like this current one, my past relationships. And like, you think you're coming from love, but you're not. And you don't know that until you really start to go through and heal a lot of these wounds.
Can you go into that? You mentioned about how wounds are showing up in your relationship. Would you care to share any that you've noticed? Maybe you've worked through some of them. Maybe there's some stuff that you're still going through right now, and that's great to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the longest time, one of my biggest wounds was when somebody shuts down or someone gets angry or frustrated, I would feel like they didn't love me. And it's not an intellectual, they didn't love me. Obviously, intellectually, it's like, oh, you're still in a relationship. They're not going to go anywhere. Everybody has emotions. It's a deep, deep feeling, that deep pit in your gut that's like, okay, this might not, get better, and we might end up breaking up. And that's from a deeper wound from my childhood, of when somebody shutting down. I just felt not loved. I felt unlovable. So in order to avoid feeling this deep pain, whenever somebody would shut down or get frustrated, I would pour myself into them. I would sacrifice what I valued or what I thought for them. If we argued on a certain thing, or if, even when it came to physical things, it's like, okay, whatever I can give to you and show to you to get you to love me in the way that I want to be loved, and to get you to not feel so separate from me, I will give that to you. And I feel like you see this so often in relationship, because you don't realize, like, you think, oh, I'm being selfless and I'm loving this person where they're at, but you're not, because you are not loving yourself. And when you don't love yourself, that is not love. And once I started pouring my energy into myself and loving every aspect of who I was, I started to see the truth of what was going on, that these individuals are going through their own wounding, and this is why they were shutting down. They're going through their own journey. And if I'm going to be there to step in and make things comfortable and kind of change the environment for them to make it so they don't get triggered, to make it so they're happy, then they won't have the opportunity to look at their pain, and they won't be able to heal their pain. And that is what I noticed as I started pouring my energy into myself, the distance that I felt with my partner, and how that didn't trigger me anymore, that I was a lot more it was a lot more comfortable of an idea because I felt so whole and I didn't need them to fill me up anymore.
And now that you've really claimed this power of your own, I can feel it, I can hear the journey. How has that affected your relationships now? Like, what is the outcome of doing that?
So the biggest relationship, I mean, is my partner. We've been together for a couple of years now. So as I was saying, yeah, we kind of felt this distance, and part of me was holding back on doing my own work and really loving myself because I think there was a subconscious fear that if I did, we would start to grow apart. And I knew that was one of his biggest fears, is that I would be doing this work on myself and he wouldn't be good enough for me. And so part of me was like, oh, I don't want to make him feel that way because I love him. And so it was like a pull between my humanness, which I was like, my humanness was like, oh, I want to make him feel comforted and loved. And my soul that was like, I need something more than this. Like I need something, somebody's going to match me up here. And that was a big lesson from Rachel too, is like, I told her, I was like, I feel like I'm going down. Like, I feel like I'm up here. And then like to connect with him, I'm like going down and I'm trying to like make him feel loved. And she's like, you need to stay up here. You need to stay in your castle because he's not going to be able to reach you and have motivation to come and meet you up where you are if you keep going down to him and enabling him to function at that level. And so I started to feel this distance, and it's been really crazy. It's kind of scary because, it could result in us not working out. And that's just, that's how it is, and moving on. Or it could result in what has been happening in our relationship recently, which I'll share a little bit of that. So this distance is pretty crazy. This distance that we experienced really triggered something in him. So there was like a few weeks where we just felt so separate. And I could see the hurt. I could like feel the hurt in him. But I also didn't want to cater. I didn't want to go down and be like, oh, just tell me about it. Like he had so many walls. And so he wouldn't even talk to me about it. I could just sense him clinging on to me. Like he needed me. And I could see this pain in his eyes. And it wasn't until a few weeks later that he kind of cracked. He started doing this, like some shadow work. So some deep diving into some wounds through these journal prompts. And because he had all this pain sitting within him, something just hit him to where he just started crying, and he realized that this wound of me leaving him was the same wound that he felt as a kid when his mom left them. And that was such a monumental change for him. And I don't think I've seen him cry. I think maybe like once in our relationship, and he cried for like 3 or 4 days straight after that. But since then, it's like almost like he took off a layer, like his defensive layer. He's able to see that pain that he's been ignoring our whole relationship. And it's so crazy that the reason why we were so disconnected and I felt like he couldn't meet me was not because of his pain, where you'd think like, oh, he has this deep pain, he can't connect. It's what he learned to block himself from feeling the pain that was building the wall between me, because he was building a wall within himself to not be able to feel that hurt. So once he opened up to it and started feeling into it and starting to love what's coming up, our relationship has been a whole new, deep, insane level. And not to say that, more things that don't come up, but we have like the tools, like, okay, what's coming up in you? I don't see him pushing his pain away or his uncomfort or shutting down. Something comes up and he verbalizes it. And it's, it's been really incredible. And it's so crazy to think that we wouldn't have gotten here unless I started to take the time to really do the work on myself and put the pressure off of him. Like so many months of just getting so annoyed and frustrated with him when really all I needed to do was be that for myself and just see kind of how things would unfold.
Yeah, so many things I can relate to. And that, number one is we think that coddling someone and going down to their level is love, when in reality, we're just taking away their opportunity to learn the lesson that they need to learn for them to get to the next level. And then the second thing is the power of staying in your castle and being in all of that resonance of, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to be up here. And if you want to meet me up here, good, I'll see you up here. And it really comes down to they always have a choice, right? And I think that's the most interesting thing about a relationship between two people is when one awakens, the other gets to witness and breathe and live and see all of the changes and the transformation. And then they have a choice of, do I want to also go down that path or do I want to stay stagnant? And it sounds like your partner was ready to take that step. And I think that's the beauty of where we're headed as a humanity, but also as conscious partnerships, as those begin to really blossom, is what does that really look like? And what does that really feel like? And it's about make the choice that's going to serve you. That's it.
And, it only came from you stepping into power. It only came from the fact that you were able to be the spaciousness and stand in your power, that he was then able to see what he's needing to work through. And we can go around powerless, just enabling each other, or we can do what you did, where you take this step. And as you said, there's a lot of fear on both sides coming up. I've personally been working through a lot of that recently. And there's a lot of fear that comes from standing in your power because it creates some uncertainty and it brings up old wounds. But the freedom that comes on the other end of it, wow.
So much freedom.
So much freedom, right?
That's literally the term, the word that it feels, just free. You don't have somebody dictating how you're feeling. You don't have to be sacrificing a little bits of yourself to make them happy, because you are whole and you feel so good within yourself, and you can serve that person from a place of wholeness instead of a place of giving and powerlessness, giving away of yourself.
Yes. So beautiful. Oh, there you are, Danny. But yeah, Madison, for everyone at home, if you are interested in working with Madison, set up a free consultation with her. This girl, I've witnessed her journey, and this is just the beginning for you. And I can see and feel how many people you're going to be helping along the road. And so for any of you who resonate with her, go to mastersofselfuniversity.com. For anyone out there, Madison, who wants to jump, but they're like, I don't know. What would you say to them?
It all starts with you. I feel like there's so many people that pour their energy and heart and soul into trying to fit their world into a place that'll make them happy. But once you start really diving into those wounds and healing and connecting and being a vessel for your soul to shine through, everything in your world will just fall into place in the exact way that it's supposed to. So, starts with you, baby.
Yes. Any last words, Danny?
No, that was beautiful, perfect. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'll say is Madison's a beast. Let's get this ball started. Let's get this ball rolling. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and talking about yourself and your relationships and religion. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah, Madison, we love you. And for everyone else, check out mastersofselfuniversity.com, subscribe, like, comment, share, do all the good things. And until next time, we'll see you guys then. Bye.